In Act 1, Scene 2, Lady Macbeth waits for her husband to come back from killing the king. And as she waits, she says that that which hath made them drunk and hath quenched them hath given me fire. She's talking about the guards, and she has consumed the same intoxicating agent that they consumed, and yet while it made them drunk, it made her bold. It quenched them, but it gave her fire. Don't forget that she summoned spirits earlier, and the spirits were referred to in liquid form as she was going to pour them in the ear of her husband. These guards are so drunk that they look as if they are dead. As she waits for her husband to return, she hears some noise, and she fears that the assassination has not been successful. And as she fears that, she questions why. For example, the daggers that Macbeth was supposed to use, she left right near the body. And this he refers to her husband. How could he possibly miss those daggers? They were right next to the body. Here, however, she starts being more ambiguous with her pronouns, and it's unlikely that this he refers to Macbeth, because it is King Duncan who is sleeping. This particular pronoun reference suggests that King Duncan is in some ways, or in many ways, like Lady Macbeth's father. Is it her father? No. But as she is his subject, and he is the king, he is a metaphorical father. In those ways, she recognizes how wrong it is to do what they were trying to do. When her husband shows up, he says he's done the deed, and we'll see this word a number of times. It's an interesting word. It often has positive connotations, not necessarily, but often. It also reeks of contract. As he questions who's lying in the second chamber, he also says that this is a sorry sight, but he doesn't tell us what this is. Most directors have him stare at his hands, because soon he'll make a comment about his hands, but it also may be a statement about the whole situation and what they have gotten themselves into. He worries here about people hearing or perhaps seeing what he has done. And one of the most important pieces is that he refers to his hands as hangman's hands. Back in the day, an executioner would not only perform the execution, but would also have to dismember the body afterwards, hence the bloody hands. He's concerned about that evidence on his hands. And that concern about evidence can also be seen in his curiosity about why he cannot say amen. He's feeling bad. I had most need of blessing, but he cannot seem to say amen. And wherefore, don't forget, means why. It does not mean where. She's concerned that worrying is going to make him crazy, but she uses us. This could be a sort of royal we, but it also could be just the two of them. He becomes exceptionally concerned with sleep and how sleep is so terrific. For example, a balm is something that heals you. The second course in a meal is the main course. It's the chief nourisher. And he's worried that sleep will no longer return to him because he has done something terrible. He worries that he will be tortured eternally. Here, Lady Macbeth insists that they can rectify the situation if he would just go wash the blood from his hands. But instead of calling it blood, she calls it a filthy witness, an interesting description, because as a witness, it does bear witness to what he has done, and calling it filthy does acknowledge the fact that it's not a pristine act that they have completed. Here seems to be where she notices that he still has the daggers with him, and she wants him to go back and put the blood on the guards who are still asleep. But he says, no, I won't go. I don't even want to think about what I've done, let alone look on it. If you pay attention to the sight motif, you'll see lots of eyes and references to looking at things. Here is one of the most interesting lines for her. She says, "If he do bleed, I'll gild the faces of the grooms withal." She's going to smear the blood on the guards if Duncan is still bleeding when she goes to the room. Back in the day, it was believed that a murder victim would bleed again if the murderer returned to the scene of the crime. This suggests that Lady Macbeth feels culpable, feels an accomplice for what has been done, because she acknowledges that the body may bleed again when she returns to the room. Interesting, too, that she uses this verb to describe what she will do to the faces of the guards. This refers to smearing blood on their faces, but gilding is an act of covering something in gold, so she's describing Duncan's blood as if it is golden. That suggests, similar to her reference to him looking like her father, that she acknowledges that he is in some ways special. Down here, as the scene starts to culminate, Macbeth stares at his hands, perhaps, and fears that his own hands, will pluck out his own eyes. This is allusion to a Greek drama character named Oedipus, who plucked out his eyes because he didn't want to look on something he had done, something very, very terrible. Here, Macbeth is afraid that even if he washed his blood from his hands in the ocean, his hands wouldn't come clean, and the whole sea, which is normally green or blue, would turn red. Incarnadine is a fancy Latin word to make something red. This is a good example of how Shakespeare would follow up a big fancy Latin term with a more clear, simple explanation. When she returns with the daggers, she notes that she has bloody hands, but she says she'd be ashamed if her heart were so white. Often we think of white as sort of a pure color. In this case, it's more about shame, that if you have a white heart, you're ashamed. Again, she insists that water can clear them of the deed. What do you think? I'm not so sure.